Kia ora and welcome to the programme. Emergencies happen and the consequences can often be as complex as they are critical. If you're a regulator, then this three-part series of films is for you. After reducing risk, how do you go about getting ready for, responding to and recovering from any emergency event? Now, you may not think that you're a crisis regulator, but these films may surprise you with the news that you are. The network and cast of characters in the drama of a crisis that requires regulation runs wide. The National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, provides strong national leadership in reducing risk, being ready for, responding to, and recovering from emergencies. Their 4 R's of emergency management are risk reduction, readiness, response, and recovery. In this episode, we look at risk reduction and readiness. In episode 2, response, and finally, episode 3 is about recovery. Let's leave it to our regulators to tell the story, which starts here in the nation's capital. Although, as we all know, a crisis that needs a regulator could be anywhere.
So in terms of NEMA, it's how we proactively reduce risks is important. It's how we come together with the community and mitigate those risks we can. There's a lot of risks that you can't reduce it, but it's how we manage it and control it. And that can be simple things as personal ownership, dealing with your family or the community, and communities coming together to reduce risk. And that can be a link between central government, local government, and the community should be involved in all those parts of the chain. Now, there are a number of regulations and laws that can mitigate risk, which are extremely important.
So the earthquake's just happened. And you look around your office and imagine what would have happened here, what things would have come off shelves, what's been tipped over, water's running out of the taps. There are things you can do around your own office to make that more quake-proof so that your business can carry on. But in the wider picture of things, you've got a part to play in the response for an earthquake. How is your business going to continue? Who are your key people? What are your key assets? What are your key systems? If you have those all tightened up before the next earthquake, you'll be able to perform better and deliver on what your mission statement is.
In these programmes, we give primary emphasis to readiness, response, and recovery, when the original fundamental risk cannot be reduced any further, when it falls for the risk that's left in place to be managed by readiness, response, and recovery. How do regulators get ready for a crisis? And how do they protect and connect with the communities they serve? And then there's also well-being. Not just the communities. How do regulators look after themselves? Planning is key. This is one of the objectives of the National Disaster Resilience Strategy. The National Disaster Resilience Strategy outlines a vision and long-term goals for civil defence emergency management in New Zealand. The objectives include implementing measures to ensure that the safety and well-being of people is at the heart of the emergency management system. The strategy sets out what the government expects in respect of a resilient New Zealand and what it wants to achieve over the next 10 years. This strategy, which took effect in April 2019, is for all New Zealanders and all those who live, work or visit here. It's intended to provide a common agenda for resilience that individual organisations, agencies and groups can align with for collective impact.
At its most basic level, you need to get to know your neighbour. At home, you need to know who's got the gas barbecue, who's got the chainsaw, who needs a bit of help, who can help. If you take that up to the city level, the same thing applies. Who knows the rules for this? Who can let that happen? Who can stop that from happening? And I think it's the same at the national level as well. So it's not just about the regulation and the regulators. It's a need to understand those, but also understanding the needs of the community. Where's the student army going to come from? How are they going to be looked after in terms of health and safety and traffic regulations, for example? So I think it's really important that we all get to know our neighbours at all the different levels of society.
My role is the National Manager of Compliance and Investigations for Tenancy Services. You may not think that I am a regulator during a crisis, but I am. My team play a really important part in ensuring that people are able to enforce their tenancy rights when things are against them. During a crisis, people's housing and accommodation can be affected. They can be forced out onto the street. Landlords can behave unscrupulously, and it's our job to see that they don't, and to see that those people are able to live comfortably in their homes and navigate through whatever crisis the country is facing. You may not think that your job is that of a crisis regulator. For example, your day-to-day job might be that of a policy analyst. You might be a procurement specialist. But during a crisis, people's skills come to the fore, and many people find that they have transferable skills. This was really apparent to me during the COVID crisis of 2020, when we pulled together a whole bunch of people from across the business, asked them to do the job of a regulator. They got stuck in, they did a great job, and were very, very successful. So don't think that because your job is not that of a regulator, that you can't do it or that you won't be good at it.
But we have to go beyond, behind, and before all that, because for it to work well, it's not just about socialising the strategy on its own, it's about socialising full stop. That is, having the networks in place already across regulatory systems and being regulatory stewards across them. Being ready even before it's time to respond.
Collaborative interagency planning and relationship building in readiness is really important, we've found, especially when it's 3 a.m. and you need to pick up the phone and get someone in to help you. It's much better if you've met before and you've built some rapport face to face. An emergency response is really reliant on coordination, and coordination comes when you have clear understanding of roles and responsibilities by everyone involved. That's from the incident level through to the local, regional and national level.
In a sense, if there's one thing that you should take away from this programme, it's that whatever crisis you plan to regulate, there are a lot of players in this, more players than meet the eye. Just who in the community needs to be party to the plan? How far do you go? And how do you approach them in peacetime before the crisis strikes?
When you're regulating during a crisis, it's impossible to do it without the support of your partners and stakeholders. So what they do for you is they get the message out, they help you with communication to the communities that we're trying to connect with. It's really difficult for a central government agency to make those connections and to communicate those messages without the help of our partners and stakeholders.
So once we've understood what our hazards are and what we need to do to mitigate or reduce those, we are then in a better position to understand our response. But in order to get to that point, we need to be ready, and we need to understand what we need to have in place for that. Our relationships, our workforce, our structures, our processes, all of this makes up the framework that we need to have in place to be ready. Being ready to respond for an event requires a number of things to be in place. The most important element is our workforce. We need the right people in the right place at the right time. Nothing else will work if that's not in place. Between those people, we need good, strong, trusting relationships. That's vital. And after that, the right tools in the toolbox, our facilities, our equipment, but also our structures and processes. Together, these elements form the framework for readiness.
Strong, trust-based relationships should be in place pre-emergency, not least with the communities that regulators serve. Maintaining the relationships and not letting them go stale is critical. In a crisis, livelihoods and even lives could depend upon it.
There is no right answer to how iwi Māori involve themselves in an emergency event. It is up to them to determine how they best support a response, including what they need to support a response, and that's the responsibility of government. But we need to be clear on that so they can ensure effective support to their communities. Iwi Māori involvement in an emergency event will be underpinned by traditional knowledge, values and practices such as manaakitanga and karakia. It's important that we improve our awareness of these practices and how we can apply them through our methods when we're supporting an emergency response. Development and maintenance of relationships in peacetime is critical. Acknowledging iwi as a key partner based on mutual interests, shared interests and respect goes a long way. Understand what's happening locally and regionally for iwi Māori and what their priorities are. The National Disaster Resilience Strategy has an overarching intent for a resilient Aotearoa, which includes equitable outcomes for Māori. The way we get there is through some of the suggestions I've mentioned.
One of the biggest challenges we have in emergency management is maintaining relationships between emergency events. Some of the best ways to keep those relationships alive are finding some common projects where everybody has kind of skin in the game, planning scenarios, doing some exercises. Those are all good examples of just making sure people come together. The benefits of that is you really find out who's in the room, what capacities and capabilities they're bringing, and clarifying roles and responsibilities. And that's all part of us as well, kind of knowing who's in your emergency kit during an event. So at the Wellington Region Emergency Management Office, one of our roles is to coordinate across a range of actors from local government, a host of central government agencies, local iwi, MODI, NGOs, and community groups, and that's a big part of our job.
So we need to put ourselves in the shoes of those people who are experiencing an emergency. They may be scared, they may be wondering who they can trust, they may be wondering what to do. So we need to ensure that the public trusts us as an information source and that they know where to go to get that information. We need to ensure we're giving clear, measured advice to the public so that they feel in control of their actions and how they can keep themselves safe or limit the impacts of the emergency. Emergencies will be fast moving, they'll be dynamic, they'll be a little bit frightening for some people. We need to make sure that in an emergency people know where to get the information. We need to make sure that that information is being kept up to date and that information is really, really clear. But it's really important that we do as much of that work in peacetime as possible so that people aren't doing a crash course in the middle of an emergency on where to get the information, who to get the information from, or what they need to do. So the more we do in peacetime to prepare the public or our communities or our families in whānau, the better prepared we'll be when an emergency happens.
It's a real weight to carry around, this plan on a page or more in one's head. And it's not just the potential well-being of the community that's at stake, it's that of the regulator, who has to carry all this around in their minds and on their shoulders while doing their day job.
I think we've learned a lot about well-being in the last 10 years, and everyone understands that when you're under pressure and under stress and making decisions without the full facts, that's a highly difficult situation for you to be in personally. So I think it's given now that personal hygiene is what well-being really is all about. I think that if we take that as a given, it's really important we also think about the organisation's well-being, because an organisation that has cracks and perhaps isn't performing so well before an emergency will find those cracks turn into major schisms during and after an emergency, and disintegration can happen. So I think it's really important that we also look after organisational well-being as well as personal well-being.
So in emergency management, we have some pretty well-defined structures and systems in place, org charts, roles and responsibilities. Another part of that is that spontaneous community response, which happens in every big disaster. In any response, small or large, people, communities stand up and play a role that's also really important. And there's a huge amount of capacity and capabilities out in our communities that we often don't recognize. Our role in emergency management is how to really start working at how do we join those two systems up during a response. At REMA, we take a community empowerment approach to our work in resilience. And so one of the things we do is apply an asset-based community development model to all of our work, looking at the types of physical and social assets that are in our community. I think one of the things we don't appreciate enough in emergency management is that people are actually pretty good problem solvers day to day, and emergencies just provide a different set of challenges. But people are pretty good still at solving challenges, and that's what we see in pretty much every event. And we do that through our Community Emergency Hub program, where we go into a suburb, we do a bunch of planning with everybody in that community, they build a framework, and then that allows us to support that community in more targeted ways, and allows us as well in emergency management to focus our energy on those who need it most.
What happens when disaster strikes, whether it's natural or non-natural? It's more than just switching on the plan. And what about business as usual? That's in the next episode. And the importance of prior relationships with the players in the plan remains key. Until the next episode, ka kite ana.